So let me introduce Chris Wilkinson from First Retail. I'll ask Chris to just explain a little bit of what First Retail does, and that saves me that issue. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Who are we? We're a company called First Retail Group. We're a New Zealand business. We work around the world. Last year we delivered projects in Dubai, UK, Australia, Pacific Islands and New Zealand. We work with progressive city councils and district councils throughout New Zealand. A very wide spectrum from Auckland through to places like Gore, Balclutha. It's an area we love. Our background is in retail, so for many years we owned a retail chain of stores, and we moved into the consultancy sector in the early 2000s. New Zealand is pretty much our main market, and most recently we've been delivering a real diversity of projects. We've just delivered the nighttime economy strategy for Auckland CBD. We've worked on the Greylin strategy, Dominion Road recently, Glen Innes, Pororo City Centre, Invercargill City Centre, and Queenstown Town Centre strategies, among others. So, yeah, New Zealand is a place we know. The most important thing is every area has unique aspects. There are no cookie cutter and there are no standard solutions to these issues or opportunities. So today's agenda, it's not about talking to you, it's about talking with you. We want to find out some of the essence of what you're seeing in terms of successes and opportunities in the town centre. So we're going to share some perspectives on what we're seeing in other areas, both locally and internationally, and with particular reference to Cambridge's opportunities. And then we're going to ask you for your perspective. So we really want to get some interaction. We've already had fantastic feedback in the last couple of days from businesses. As Steve mentioned, we've worked here before in Waipa with the Te Awa Mutu community. And our background in the Waikato, we've worked with the council in Hamilton and many of the large businesses in Hamilton as well. We recognise that some of you will need to leave for 9 o'clock, so we aim to have everything wrapped up just before 9 as far as this first part of the presentation is concerned. So what do we want to achieve from today? We want to understand what Cambridge's unique edge is. It's all about differentiation. That's what drives success in town centres. Differentiation, being able to establish that USP. Defining where, as a town centre, we can excel. How can we set ourselves apart? How can we create that unique factor? Where we need to prioritise efforts and investment, both are limited commodities. Where are we best placed to spend our time and money? And lastly, it's important that we maintain our focus on performance, so securing our unfair share of spend. And like any town centre, we are facing increasing competition. And as we get a stronger population, a larger population, we're also going to be increasing competition within this area as well. So where does the town centre sit in this wider realm? These are the things we want to talk to, and we also want your feedback on in that question and answer session as we come through. So these are the questions that we will be asking at the end, and we really want to get some feedback. So have a think about them. Differentiation. How can Cambridge develop its specialness? Experience. What types of unique customer experiences can define Cambridge? And finally, the mix and delivery, and that's a really important part. What do we need more of to strengthen our offer and relevance? How do we need to change? How do we need to meet the needs and expectations of our future audience in order to maintain and grow that performance that we're seeing right now? I'll kick off with some statistics, because This is really useful to reflect on. All positive statistics, maybe a little one warning sign, but in terms of our spending growth from within the Waipa District consumers, 8% growth. So we are an appealing destination. We're drawing people to this area. From the rest of the Waikato, we're seeing 4.5% growth. And these aren't figures that we're seeing from other areas, I must say. So it's an attractive place to come. It's an appealing place to come for people. A very interesting point, the 11% growth from international consumers. Now, we've got some businesses here today who've already talked about the changing face of Cambridge in terms of visitation. Cruise passengers coming through, more tourists coming on trips through as they're heading towards Hobbiton and Waitomo. Big potential in terms of our tourist market. And it's good to see those figures are borne out. 11% is quite spectacular, and we've been working with some other areas in New Zealand which are happier at much lower figures. So this potential has even further opportunity to grow. Some other figures, 148 million, that's total spend by local consumers in 2018, and local is termed as Cambridge and Leamington. 5.9% growth from local consumers from 17 to 18. The one thing that we probably do need to focus on is 7.4%. We're starting to see greater attrition, so local consumers spending more outside the area. So that's just one point. And this is, and in respect of that, we need to start looking further at what the needs and expectations of our consumers are. Too often we speak to commercial communities who make assumptions, or their rationale is based on historic reasoning. It's a very dynamic market now. All communities have a very dynamic market, both in terms of competition and in terms of our audiences. It doesn't take much just to see the growth in tourism and where that's heading. But in places like Cambridge, we're also seeing more people moving here. The Auckland exodus is transforming things. So there's a whole lot of different dynamics at play. And one of the key outcomes from this event today will be a focus on better understanding the needs and expectations of our community. At every stage of the process, Cambridge needs to be taking the pulse of its customers and adapting accordingly, because they are the ones that are going to drive our future success. We get a lot of opportunity to look at great town centres, both working here and working overseas. We see the things that are working, we see the things that aren't working. The secrets to success are differentiation, creating something that's absolutely unique, which essentially Cambridge has now. So it's a question of what do we do to enhance that, to enrich it. Experience. Being able to develop trademark experiences that are unique and uniform through the city, through the town, that people anchor to, people hanker for. We've got a natural warmth here in Cambridge. We've got a unique scale that allows those relationships, that friendliness and that happiness to come through. So it's those types of things. What kind of unique experiences can we develop here that people will hanker for, they'll advocate for? And again, if we look at the successes of businesses now, more often not, what's driving their successes is that consumer advocacy, whether it be through social media or just even connections. Forget about all the advertising that we used to do in the past. It's all driven through advocacy now. The mix and delivery. And so often people will say, how can you tell a town centre what to deliver, how best it should shape and what kind of business should be there? Well, if a town centre has a strategy, has a firm focal point, then everyone is working in that same direction. And as the shop comes up, you'll see that those neighbours will be working very, very hard to make sure that the business that goes in there will add value to that community and add value to their businesses as well. Cohesion is another aspect. So working together, we've already got a very strong and cohesive community here, very much tied in with the chamber. And again, we do get to see a lot of town centres and city centres and the good chambers, and this is a very good chamber. So we're very lucky to have such capability and cohesion here. One final point that I haven't mentioned here, but it is about that alignment with our customers' needs today and tomorrow. That's another aspect that we really need to focus on. So the key shifts that we've seen in the last few years, the key shifts from consumers, from the way that our businesses are delivering, localism and provenance. More and more consumers are wanting to spend locally. All kinds of dynamics are driving this, but we're starting to see more neighbourhood dining in our bigger cities, so less of a focus to go into the cities, more of a focus to spend time in the suburbs. Provenance, so people being very aware of the local producers, markets. You've seen the success of markets. You know, this is almost a circle again that's coming back, but markets are very, very popular throughout the country. And we're even seeing sort of micro markets now develop. We've been working with some big university campuses, and it was fascinating to be in one the other day and find a little producer market on Wednesdays that comes and sets up in the quad. But it was really delightful to see these students, and it's a big university, one of New Zealand's biggest, but all of these stalls set up, and they're the same stalls that you or I would go to on a Saturday or a Sunday at our local markets. So localism and provenance are a key aspect. Again, places like Cambridge can really excel in that because you are such a producer region. Environmental focus, that's moving very rapidly. We didn't take much to see how quickly the plastic bag thing moved. We're going to start seeing that further perpetuate with packaging. And because of that, that's going to push even further into the whole localism and provenance set. Our journeys are changing. You know, just how quickly things like the Lime scooters have taken over in Auckland. We're from Wellington and we've got the Onzo bikes. And just outside of Wellington, they've got Lime scooters in the Hutt Valley. And that's a big suburb, but you'll find those Lime scooters all over. And it's interesting, we talked yesterday a little bit about scooters and things and the challenges of cobblestones. Well, I've got to say, in Lower Hutt, you find these scooters. We often go for walks on the weekends, and you find these scooters in the middle of nowhere, so that is no barrier. But again, the work in Auckland has shown us just how that's transforming people's connectivity. And we've seen also how the likes of Uber has transformed connectivity. And the challenge, of course, we have here is that it's an expensive ride or there aren't those facilities available. So these things are changing rapidly, and they are having a massive influence on our communities and the performance of our businesses. Once upon a time, retail was the anchor of a town or city centre. No longer. Food and beverage and hospitality is the new anchor. That's the thing that draws people on a more regular basis to the towns and cities. So it's vital that we have a strong food and beverage sector. And it's vital that we work with our retail sector to make sure that our hospitality sector is interspersed with that retail, so that we've got that daily or twice daily connection. They're drawing people past our stores and creating that footfall so necessary for retail success. And then finally, experience-led offers. Going into stores for experiences that people crave. They enjoy it, relationship-based, difference in products, and all those aspects. Experience-led offers are absolutely vital. So how are businesses responding to these changes? How are the successful businesses responding? Well, firstly, it's through digital visibility, because that's what's leading our consumers into our stores more than ever before. That's what's leading our customers off the expressway into Cambridge, what they're seeing online. And our work in Queenstown showed that tremendously in the fact that people were making their decisions based on their digital research. Their destination decisions were coming from digital research. And I used an example yesterday to the group we talked to at lunchtime here about Wellington, where when a big rugby match happens, they typically close Courtenay Place, the entertainment district in town. And going back to the last Lions test where that happened, Courtenay Place was empty because today those international tourists had researched where they wanted to be, and they'd navigated themselves into the back alleys of Wellington, to those kinds of bars and restaurants that only the locals knew about. It was digital visibility and influence that was driving that. So a very, very different landscape. So digital is a very, very important part of the success of a town and city centre. And it's great, again, that Cambridge has strong competency in digital enablement, great skills, and it's a town that is focused on digital, but there's room to grow that. Collaboration. Businesses working very, very closely together to create experience-led offers, to develop things like educational environments in stores and all kinds of different things where much stronger cohesion in the business community. Because when things are happening en masse, then that brings the people. Local awareness and pride. We always talk about the shop local aspect, but you can't ask people to shop local without proving that you deserve their goodwill. Gore is a very good example of that. So Gore is another very successful provincial town. And about 4 years ago, the mayor there recognised that online shopping was going to be a major impediment for their town centre. There was an article in the paper about how all the couriers had doubled the sizes of their vans. That was after a Postie Plus store closed. That was the dawning, I guess, for the council, and ever since then they have been firmly focused on resilience and performance for their retail sector. And their work has been recognised around the world for developing much stronger cohesion. And I tell you, one of the best stories we've ever heard is that they've got a very strong, very, very popular jeweller there in Gore, and a consumer was driving to Dunedin, and she got halfway to Dunedin, and then she remembered about the Love Gore strategy that council had developed, which really was focusing people on prioritising spending locally. And she was intent on purchasing quite a large piece of jewellery. She turned around and she went back to the jeweller and she purchased her item there, and she told him that story. And that was just one example, but Gore has had strong growth in an area which has been quite challenged, the wider Southland region. And it's all because of a very strong strategy that council has developed. And one of the key parts of that strategy is it constantly listens to its consumers and it's constantly adapting. And that focus, keeping it local, is really about recognising that their offer must be customer-led, not retailer-led or hospitality-led. The other aspect is that their strategy keeps evolving. They're constantly looking at what better things they can do. They're constantly looking outside their environment and at areas overseas and wider trends. So that prioritising goodwill is really, really important, because that is the secret to retaining business in the local area. So we looked at some comparisons here. Too often we look at neighbouring towns or cities, and here in Cambridge we have a very, very unique environment. I kind of liken it to when we started working in Queenstown, and there were no benchmarks for a place like Queenstown. Often the council had looked at places like Whistler and Aspen, but they're only other alpine towns. They didn't have those same dynamics going on that Queenstown did. So through our work in Queenstown, we looked further afield. We looked at places like Bath, who had strong tourism dynamics, challenges with their town centres, and all kinds of other aspects. So that's why we're saying here, don't let whatever else other people are doing in New Zealand influence you. Look outside at other types of dynamics that are going on, because there are a lot of very interesting things that are happening in different parts of the world. We've got a very expectant market here, a very resourced consumer, whether they be visitors or they be locals. We're lucky because of that. But we also need to be mindful that we need to be catering for that widest spectrum of the community. We don't want to disenfranchise the first home buyers, the younger people in the community. And that was a kind of a message that's come through from a number of parties we've spoken to over the last couple of days. Cambridge still must be a place that people can find affordability and relevance within the retail and hospitality offer. So this is we've also got some other interesting things going on in terms of our growth cells. So there will be some growth in retail, there will be some competition in terms of retail, more convenience-led. But how will that influence the way the town centre shapes in the future? Most important thing is the town centre needs to be in charge of that shaping. It can't be shaped by, it needs to lead rather than be led. So I wanted to just talk about some of the other places that in some ways we've looked at these ones, we've spent quite a bit of time in them talking to the town centre leaders, to the councils, to the businesses. And this is some work that we've been doing in the UK, not necessarily for these towns or cities, but for other areas there. In Stratford, how many people have been to Stratford upon Avon? Yeah, it's one of the most visited places in the UK. It's always been a strong tourism destination. But it was always a very strong local centre. And every year we visited Stratford, you know, the tractors would be driving through town, and you'd still see those locals coming in to shop. But more and more now, with suburban centres developing in that area, that local relevance is gone. The market's moving more towards experiential offers. Food and beverage is starting to lead, and there's less relevance for the local consumers. So interesting just to see how a town centre like Stratford is dealing with that, how it's dealing with the increase in certain demographics of tourists, logistical issues around getting buses into the city centre, into the town centre, very much like Cambridge has. Very interesting dynamics. So just little areas there are some similarities. Big focus on prioritising the public realm for pedestrians. Very important, because that is enabling them to get greater scale. And as we see more people coming through Cambridge, how are we going to deal with those larger volumes of people? When we worked in Queenstown, one of the outcomes that came from the strategy was the $2 bus fare, because we needed to shift people very quickly from thinking that they needed to drive into town. And those vehicles were splitting the town. Those vehicles were impeding the progress of town. So developing some audacious moves were necessary. Another outcome was pedestrianising Beach Street, which was necessary because the businesses there weren't able to perform to their maximum. And as Queenstown continues to develop and scale, and we're doing a big project there at the moment involved with Skyline, where their gondolas are going to double in size. And that's just one indicator of just the scale of where places like Queenstown will get to. So it's about thinking forward about how we're going to provision for that scale. Stratford was starting to lose that relevance with its local consumers. So what did it do? It focused on events to prioritise visitation from its locals to maintain that relevance. And we were there in September last year when they had the Stratford Wine and Food Festival, and it was fascinating talking to a lot of those locals about their change in shopping habits. I moved to Bath now. So Bath is an area we looked at particularly around Queenstown, but other areas as well. So you wouldn't think about driving a vehicle into Bath anymore. Bath has very, very good park and ride facilities. In fact, that ride into Bath on the double-decker bus from the park and ride at the top of the hill is probably one of the best bus rides you'll ever take. It's amazing. With their success, master planning that retail mix. They have a very strong chamber. In fact, what the chamber is called there is a business improvement district, but very similar to what you have here. But a strategic approach to getting the retail mix right for its consumers. Vehicles are retreating for the CBD. It's more difficult to drive around there, but they've also made it easier in terms of parking on the fringes and leveraging public transport. We know that public transport is a vulnerability here. That's something that, as a community, there needs to be greater focus on. And it's going to be necessary too with our ageing population and greater visitation. But that's a subject for a different day. Bath's worked very hard at trademark experiences. So people come away from that place with that wow factor, a real connection to Bath. And very strong environmental guardianship, and that's the thing that they want to hang their hat on. Shrewsbury probably was the most interesting town, and this is a council that is very, very proactively working to strengthen its town centre because it realises the social value as well as the commercial value. So Shrewsbury has just gone through a major public realm improvement, so big changes in the streets. Council's just bought 2 large shopping centres there to really start shaping that town centre and the way it develops in the future. That determined CBD success is led by strong councillors. Councillors who have a vision and a good balance between the commercial needs and the social needs of that community. Very targeted in terms of its approach to retail. And when we looked at stores that were empty, invariably those stores had already been leased. Businesses aspired to be in that community because they saw the success of it, and the success was palpable. You walked through the streets, there was a vibrancy. And nearby Chester, which has always been a very strong town centre, is failing. Even the McDonald's are closing in Chester because they haven't had that forward-looking perspective and the big picture. So again, another key theme that's reduced vehicle activity. So creating pedestrian priorities so people want to stay, spend more, linger longer. And all of those aspects are driving success of the town centre and its future relevance. Come back to New Zealand. So Invercargill has often been the butt of many jokes. Invercargill is it's faced some significant challenges in the last few years. Its economy, of course, is reliant on the smelter there. It's 100,000 people, and there's a very large retail area. So what were they going to do? The challenges that Invercargill faced were big spending attrition. Dunedin's very close by, Queenstown's very close by. A resourced population, so they were travelling often. So significant spending attrition, people spending outside that area, whether they were travelling to do it or whether they were doing it online. We worked with the council 2 years ago to develop a commercial strategy that helped bring the stakeholders together and push along some key moves, so key investments. And those investments had been waiting in the wings. Invercargill was a little bit like the Waikato. You've got some very resourced individuals and companies and organisations that are firmly focused on the success of that area. And those individuals were wanting to see a strategy to be able to put their money into the right areas. And so following the strategy, the new Invercargill Central development was announced, 100 million development into the central part of Invercargill. So that's going through its planning stages now. Hopefully that kicks off in the next few months, but I can say that they've got the construction machinery waiting to start. It's that kind of dynamic that goes on down there. Invercargill didn't have a lot of pride in its city centre. So one of the outcomes was a strong city centre brand. And that's the brand that you can see in that picture there. But that was absolutely transformational. Because as a city without a brand, it was much maligned, it was a bit of a butt of the jokes. But now they've got this very strong, confident brand, and you'll see that right throughout Invercargill, whether it's on the council vehicles, on products that are made in Invercargill, like brewing and bakery products. That goes all the way through. In fact, Eddie Dawkins, who probably is more a resident here now with the Velodrome, he's got the tattoo, the Invercargill brand tattoo. And when you know people are getting tattoos, you kind of know that the brand's working well. So that's just an interesting side issue. But the confidence for investment came from strategy. And that's also within a constrained economy. So again, 100,000 people and very easy access to other places. Gore, again, we talked about that before, focused on commercial success. It's a highly active business community, very much like yourselves. The local spending and local priority, local goodwill is prioritised. In some cases, that was kind of endemic in the community, but it just needed to be teased out. But the focus for Gore is to keep that front and centre in every discussion. The need to make sure that you are supporting those local businesses. And we talked about the jewellery example, but we also talked to tractor retailers who said, we've had people coming in saying, we used to go and buy our tractors in Balclutha, or we used to go over to Lumsden or buy them in Invercargill. And you see them so even that on a different scale was really, really heartwarming. But again, the town centre knows that nothing's standing still, and they're constantly adapting to that competition. New Plymouth, we're in New Plymouth next week working with council on the city centre strategy there. Who's been to New Plymouth recently? It's got a fantastic food and beverage sector. It's probably one of the strongest food and beverage sectors in New Zealand, believe it or not. And when we were working in the UK, we popped into one of the New Plymouth businesses that have got a very large cafe in London. 150 staff they have in London, and their headquarters are in New Plymouth. So it's a place that's really punching above its weight. It's got a great and emerging nighttime economy. Council is very focused on transforming its CBD for new audiences that are coming through, encouraging more inner city living. Tourism's growing there. Strong arts, culture and events focus through the likes of Pukeariki and the Len Lai. And it also faces some increased out-of-town competition. So as you come in from the airport, there is another large retail complex, a big box destination centre going in there. And invariably that will start to compete with the town centre. Looks like there'll be a movie theatre that will go in there, and some of the businesses, the larger format businesses, will move out of the city centre. So how does that react? How does it adapt accordingly? And that's the focus, the next focus for New Plymouth Council, which will be led by a strategy that they will develop. So there's key themes that keep coming through. This localism and provenance that are driving success. An environmental focus, which is almost a fundamental. I shouldn't even have to mention that now, but that needs to be part of every town centre's baselines. Food is the new anchor. That's the thing that's drawing people on a repeated basis. Experience-led offers. So things that are unique, that are Instagrammable. Those are the things that people are wanting. And when we think about our younger generations, they're into these micro moments. They're very prepared to spend big dollars on things that will give them instant gratification, not for a long time, but for a good time. They want to spend more money with their friends. We're seeing that in the growth and spending towards hospitality and away from goods. So it's those types of things we need to be cognizant of. Community support and pride, very, very important. Most places have it, it just needs to be teased out. Be proactive ahead of challenge, so don't be led by the market, but be ahead of the market. Differentiating for appeal. Don't be like everyone else. Make sure you're doing your own thing and creating that trademark experience. And reprioritising the town centres. And I've got to say, when we work on these projects, we're very, very focused on the social aspect of what a town centre delivers. It's that connection that it gives for people. We're seeing more and more emphasis from councils as they redevelop their public realm to put things like shared tables in, so that people can sit there and meet each other on a regular basis. Look at places like France where you've got, pétanque, and those things that draw in a wide selection of the community on a regular and habitual basis. Those are the things that we're kind of missing in our town centres, and we need to start orientating back to, particularly as we're more of a digitally led community now. We're spending more time on our computers and those aspects. So those are the kinds of key themes that we're seeing success with. And it was really interesting to spend time here in the last couple of days kind of adding to our understanding of this community through other work that we've done up here. Start seeing those themes were reinforced time and time again, and even in the conversations we've had this morning, similar stuff. So the idea now is to look at those questions that we posed before. What can Cambridge do to build on past and current successes while adapting to meet the needs and expectations of future audiences? So kind of now, this is your time to share perspectives, and so we can start getting some ideas down that we can then start using to work out where our next priorities need to be. So I'm going to throw the floor open. Lorraine, do you want to grab one of the mics, and we'll... Fantastic. Oh, I was going to do that. Fantastic. All right. Who's got some ideas that they want to share? I have to just go. You go and choose someone then. Okay. We've talked a little bit this morning. In fact, I had a great conversation with Keith just about how Cambridge now needs to look at its town centre in terms of its urban, its public realm, its future development, to make sure that it's steering strategically aligned with the values that people have, the things that people have come here for, the things that they love. So maybe you want to expand a little bit on that, Keith, in terms of how we could be strategic.
Hi.
Hi.
I was just thinking, because I came from Tauranga, which was a water-based city, and I came here, it was very green. And I love the trees. So that was one thing that I could say that would be a different differentiation for Cambridge. But also because we're very focused on plastic-free and things like that at the moment too. So those are two areas that I would think that we could excel in.
Yeah, exactly. Are we seeing champions in the community in terms of these types of initiatives?
Yes, I think we are.
Yeah, and are we seeing that sort of reflected in the businesses around? Do you think? Do you reckon we need to get that seismic change happening quite quickly?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. So that would be like recycling centres in town and
composting, those sorts of things that really are focusing on bringing that stuff back in, and that sort of stuff. Yeah.
Fantastic. And so we were talking just before, Keith, about the design of the town and this future development.
Yeah, as we talked before, Chris, I think as an architect I'm very focused on the built environment rather than perhaps the economy and that side of things. And it was really talking about that the built environment becomes such a big part of the image of a town, and so it's critical that things can be design led, that we don't just let development happen without any sort of planning thought. I mean, a lot of thought comes into it from the council. The Waipa Council is fantastic to work with, but I think it needs some independent review of that as well, just to see that there's a wider care of the community and how it's developing.
And you mentioned some work earlier on in Hastings, which has started shaping the way that town centre was developing. But
Yeah,
that was
so
community.
previous to coming here, I had a practice in Hawke's Bay and Hastings, and a lot of towns around New Zealand, cities around New Zealand, have design review panels and things that are looking independently of the council at development to have some sort of, not and not a control as you can and can't do this, but to actually lead some improvement in design, so that you can have things just don't develop without any thought about design. Because so many of your images that talk about the special character of Cambridge or of a town, every single one of those photos involves the built environment. So.
Exactly. No, that's really appreciated. And the successes, again, that we're seeing locally and internationally all involve this co-creation, again, the ability to be able to leverage the great skills that are within these communities to be able to shape them for the future.
Yes, one of the things I'd like to mention is some of the changes which are going on with regard to wellness in communities. One of the things that we've tried to concentrate on here in Cambridge is developing wellness from a community standpoint. So we're trying to create a sort of family destination, also trying to ensure that we're creating a genuine link with the Te Awa cycleways, and also picking up on the theme of the Champions theme, which of course is given to us by Avante Drome and also going out to the lake. So if you look at all those things in one, we're getting a lot of families coming to the town, they're coming for the weekend, they're filling our accommodation, and they're also enjoying the sort of wellness aspect that is available in the community.
Fantastic. It's a strong social pillar, has to be fundamental too. This is important. Again, the aspiration, an event we did recently in New Plymouth, we had a lot of feedback from the DHB in the fact that they wanted to use the town centre to better engage their community. They felt that as our community ages, as our community's health needs are different and technologies are different, that the town centre was an absolute fundamental in their connection and relevance with its community. Who else has got some ideas?
Thanks. I just wanted to come back to the sort of talking around the built environment again, and just thinking about the opportunities that can be created in terms of spaces for retail and office spaces, something that's in real demand in Cambridge at the moment. And I was looking around trying to see if I can see any councillors here, and I can't unless I've missed someone. I know there's... Oh, you are? Oh, hello. Yeah, and I know there's several community board members here, so great to see you guys here. I mean, I think going beyond, perhaps, Keith, you mentioned kind of controlling that planning process a little bit, but beyond that, I would actually like to see council encouraging the kinds of development that we do want to see, getting behind us, behind a strategy and actually doing something to encourage it, because I feel like the planners at council here take a very passive approach. They don't want to create more planning rules or whatever, or there's not a lot of will to actually try to shape the kind of development that is going to happen in Cambridge, and I think that's something that we really, a strategy is all very well, but unless we've got a will to actually do something tangible to encourage the development that we want, then yeah.
Fantastic, that's exactly right. And we talked about that mix, getting that mix right of businesses. So we've got hospitality, we've got our wellness and retail, but also the value that our new businesses, the likes of our technology businesses are bringing to this area. So both in terms of attracting talent to an area, but also feeding into the spending of that area. It's no longer people bashing down the door at 9 o'clock wanting to get into shops, but at 10 o'clock, you could find those cafes are absolutely full with businesses all starting to meet up over coffees and things. So the importance of making sure that we are providing those spaces for businesses that want to locate here, the likes of these shared office environments and those aspects are quite important too. And that's, if we look at places like Havelock North, for instance, they've been quite strategic in their development, where some offices have been built recently above new retail areas, and they've encouraged a lot of technology businesses into those areas for lifestyle and convenience.
Yeah, good morning. When I had the role of the council that Steve now handles so well, I was rung one day by a man, and his opening remarks, no introduction, were, "Are you guys for real?" He's talking about the council, by the way. "Are you guys for real?" So after about 3 minutes, I worked out he had a bakery business in 2 other towns and wanted to open one here. The shop was vacant there. It had 20 car parks as part of the land. And I said, yeah, of course we are. And how can I help you? I mean, you know, we all say those sort of things, don't we, Steve? How can I help you? And he said, your lunatic planners want me to provide 43 car parks for this shop. 43. I went to the then senior planner, who did not know that this staff member had done that. And she came back to me and she said, yes, they did say 43. And I said, what are you going to do about it? She said, I'm going to support them. Now, I think we finished up with 20 because I got a tiny wee bit grumpy, as I can sometimes, and we got a bit of common sense. But this was the attitude. So I think the real message is there are some great opportunities for this town, not all in the CBD, as we saw on the front page of the local paper just yesterday, right? You know, possible new development down Victoria Road, as it is there now, which has been waiting in the wings for, Steve, many years, hasn't it? But a council at that time who didn't want to expand the CBD out, but at the same time wasn't keen to get into a mix of strata-level buildings, and Tarnas and Keith will probably have some good views on this, strata level where there was a mix of commercial and retail and apartment living. Didn't really want to know about it. Had a little tiddly bit around Victoria Square. So I think the message really is there are some great things you can do with this town. The growth is here. You can't do a thing about the growth. The people are coming. The people are coming to live, the people are coming to work, and all that is great. And the less people that have to commute to Hamilton every day is the better for everybody, including the people on the road. But what we need is a bolder attitude by the council, and I'm not just talking about the elected people here, a bolder attitude by the officers of the council to react more positively and more swiftly when there are some great ideas coming through.
So legacy thinking and behaviours is an issue, potentially. And I've got to say, this is not dissimilar from other places that we are finding where, you know, ostensibly it looks incredibly successful, and it is, but all of a sudden we get these types of commentaries coming through. Yes, you're telling us you want inner city living, but then you're also saying that you want to have 2 car parks for each of these apartments. That's not necessarily contemporary thinking or what's happening in other areas, and it's only because councils haven't addressed those issues yet, but they need to, and they need to give them priorities.
You mentioned earlier on about Shrewsbury, I think, for a couple of malls.
Yes.
And Invercargill at least 100 million. To what extent, I mean, it's quite interesting that council seem to be almost being quite interventionist or convincing focused. I mean, it's quite an interesting concept, really taking the lead. And the reason I say that is obviously it's a big call for councils to make. Alan Livingston, who's a former mayor here, did talk to me about the possibility, just prior to Parkwood, Lakewood happening, of a council buying that land and actually saying, setting out a development there and then selling it on, but having a leadership role, which is, you know, when I say big ask. So how does that work, and is it true?
Yeah, so it's interesting because it's a hugely controversial issue. Invercargill has 49% of the property company that is doing that development, and the 51% is the Richardson Group, which is Allied Concrete and Allied Petroleum, as well as one of the big hotel companies. Both of the owners live in Invercargill, so they are kind of focused beyond the immediate economic benefit of that development. So that's an interesting model, and they are using it through there. They've got investment companies that are involved in forestry and other aspects. So the 49% means that they are not a controlling stake, but an influencing stake. In New Zealand, we don't typically see a lot of councils doing any investments themselves. We work with a number, such as Panuku, which is Auckland Council's development arm that will buy property and then strategically work with developers to do the add value, but aligned with council strategies. In Wellington, we work with Build Wellington, which is part of Wellington City Council, same sort of model. So they'll work with we develop a town centre strategy or a city centre strategy, and that helps them guide their investment decisions and actions. So various models in New Zealand. In the UK, of course, the retail sector is under even greater stress than we see here. And Shrewsbury, again, progressive councillors and very progressive leadership team in the council who were prepared to step up and again make those moves that others haven't been. And because of that, they're starting to get a disproportionate amount of investment and interest in that town as opposed to others around. And it was very interesting to see the success, how it was all drawing to Shrewsbury, and the other areas were finding it tougher.
Morning. My question is around landlords, and especially in the CBD. Obviously, they play a big role in who they let their premises to, and that sort of shapes our town. How do we influence them, or how do they consult with council, who, as to what businesses we're lacking, where the gaps are, and some of the businesses that they might be putting into those premises currently are not really needed directly in the main street and are probably taking away some of our specialness.
So one of the things that we probably need to do as a town centre is have greater visibility in terms of our reasons why businesses should establish here. So we need to be out there targeting the types of businesses that are most suitable for our town centre. It was interesting talking to businesses yesterday as we walked around, and really one of the questions we said, what would add value to your business? Who would you like to see around? And immediately people came, it didn't take a second before they said, this is the business, these are the businesses we want. This is our customer base, but our customer base is changing, and we think these ones are the ones we should have here. So it's trying to get those conversations happening, but also having some collateral for these guys to make some decisions with as well. And again, with Invercargill, what they've done with that 100 million development, to get that funding, they've got something on paper that is bulletproof, that gives that confidence for that investment from the community and from the business sector. So being able to have that decision collateral is absolutely vital. I mean, here you read about it all the time. In fact, as we mentioned, the front page of the paper, it's just constant. Every time we come to Hamilton, all we see is growth. But it's really about channeling it strategically so that the town centre remains special and that we get those businesses that are going to work together effectively.
From this whole conversation is that the collective minds and getting together and getting people's enthusiasm and getting them on board is key to whatever happens in the future. And I work for Over the Moon. It's a small shop in the main street, and we started some initiatives last year to try and work with the accommodation sector and draw more people into our business, and getting people motivated to even come in and talk to us. People are busy, they don't have time. That is, it was a real barrier for us. We did get a few people, but yeah, I can see that unless we get a strong group focus and movement, there won't be change. And I just wondered what your view on that was.
Yeah, I think that the danger here is, and like all of us, when we're close to something, it's hard to be objective. And whenever we go past your shop, we kind of just go, oh my God, this would be so good and you would hear that all the time. And it's businesses like yours that create that differentiation, that edge, the Cambridge trademark. If we could have more of those, that would be ideal. But again, because you're there all the time and people go past you all the time, it becomes they're there. They take you for granted. So it's important to step back, and that's kind of what we talked about a few of the other examples that are happening around the world, more so that we kind of broaden our perspectives, but also encouraging people to step back. With the chamber here, I know there's a absolute determination to continue these conversations and to accelerate them, and really because we kind of need to head these opportunities off at the pass. We need to be able to lead them and not be led. So this is really just the start. Very strong determination by council to drive change both within their own organisation and also for the stakeholders here. So this will just be the start essentially.
Hi, I thought I'd just add something here. I'm Colleen, and I've recently moved back to Cambridge after 5 years of being away, or longer than that. And so I just thought I'd let everybody know what I have found the specialness in Cambridge. I wanted a specific outfit to wear, and I went down Duke Street, and I actually went to 3 different dress shops there. And each one, the first one did not have anything suitable. She referred me on to the next one, and I bought something there, but I needed an extra thing. And that lady referred me on to another dress shop. Each time I had a experience. So I don't buy online because I want to talk to locals. And so that just brings me to thinking, okay, well, we need to find out what our consumers want, because I also have grown children here with very good disposable income. Now, why do they buy online and not come down into Cambridge? I'd like to see all the cars go out of the main street and a couple of the side roads. I was talking to a coffee shop. I like my coffee, so I was speaking to them, and they said, we should have a little hop-on, hop-off bus. And so I just think we need to talk to the locals, the older locals who have been here a while, and also the new ones coming in, because how do we know what they need? And I haven't heard that mentioned today, that we need to go out and talk to the people.
Oh, sorry, Nick,
just
sorry.
a quick comment. Just wondering if there's anybody in the room who could raise your hand if you are a commercial property owner in Cambridge. Okay, so there's about 5 or 6. Commercial property developer? Couple. Okay, great. So one of the things that struck me is that your view, your voice, and your investment plans and your future thinking around your assets, and this kind of bit of a cloud on the horizon, which is the earthquake strengthening business that John alerted me to. We need a meeting with all of you people in the room, it seems to me, and have a bit of a yarn about the perspective of what you're talking about from that particular group of asset owners and investors, because that voice there and that perspective and your vision is vitally important to be in the mix, as opposed to those of us that rent your buildings and run the business. So I would urge that we actually, one of the initiatives out of this is that we actually have a gathering of commercial property owners and developers and have this same kind of conversation, but find out what you're thinking and where you're going as part of the mix. Thank you.
Very much appreciated, Nick. It's absolutely right. And I think that, again, out of this, there'll come some streams. I think it's important to make sure it's not a siloed, so there's not huge amounts of streams, but very much the property sector are fundamental to this success. And for them also, it's a very dynamic space as well. Things are moving rapidly. So we don't take for granted that what's happening now will be what's going to happen in the future. So,
Chris, just to follow through on that, the Chamber will obviously have a number of conversations with various retailers and groups, and we'll certainly pick up the conversation with the property owners and investors to continue those conversations if you're keen. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you. So please join us for some tea and some coffee and the continued conversations afterwards if you're able to stay. Thank you.